So, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Out of Program podcast. You're joined today by myself and my co-host Mohammed, and we're joined here with Anushka Patchava. So, Anushka is a former doctor turned healthcare executive and entrepreneur who is known for her pioneering work in digital health, AI, and insurance. She was a former deputy chief medical officer at Vitality before she went and co-founded WellEx, which is a insurtech that has won a number of global awards. And now she leads growth and clinical safety at MindStep, which is an AI-driven mental health startup. So welcome to the show, Anushka.
Hey both, great to be here.
Excellent. So just starting off, I'd like to ask about your choices right at the beginning of your career, because you chose to pursue medicine. I'm curious to know kind of what the thought process was. What was your motivation for going into the field?
Wow, you're taking me back a long while, Jing. But this is a really short answer. I don't really, I'm going to answer it really honestly. I didn't really think I had much motivation to do medicine. I come from a background where both my parents are doctors. It was an easy decision to be a doctor. I always loved biology, chemistry, and all the subjects that you need to do to get into medicine. And at the time, it seemed like easy option, easy way to do UCAS, fill in form, pass some extra exams like the BMAT, which was started in the year I applied to medical school, and get in. So my decision was really based on familiarity of that's what my parents do versus actual cerebral thought, and that went into it.
And was there any kind of parental pressure or any other external factors that went into the decision?
So I guess if they're watching this, I'd have to say no. Let's be honest. When you're growing up in those younger years where you probably have societal pressure, parental pressure, even your institutes you were at, your school pressure. Back then, medicine was seen as one of the kind of indicators of a school's success, how many people got into medical school. And so I think there was a lot of external pressure. In terms of internal drive, to be honest, I think it was more curiosity about what it would entail. It seemed like a really great career. It seemed like a safe career. And I think when you're that young and you're naturally risk averse, as I am as a person, and although that's changed as life's gone on, it just made sense. It was familiar. Everyone likes to do familiar things, so it was familiar.
No, it makes a lot of sense in the sense that when me and Jing interviewed one another, it's this familiarity, safety was one of the big drives of our parents kind of like suggesting medicine to us. And if Anushka's parents are watching, thank you for being a part of our community. I'm sure they are watching. So when you got into medical school, Anushka, were you just like head down, I need to get my medical degree, get my MBCHB, MBBS, or is that when you started to like play around with other avenues, start to like consider non-traditional paths, or were you still kind of like head down, medicine focus, get through my exams, get into like foundation training?
I don't think I ever was head down ever at any university, and I've been to four, which is telling you the truth. No, I actually started as a medic at Imperial College and dropped out of after 2 days. Don't ask me what happened in those 2 days, because I don't even think I made it into university as a medic. I actually realized very early on that I wasn't really ready to commit to a career in medicine. So I was doing biochemistry. So I switched into the biochemistry module. At the time, I think I was fascinated by genetics and lab work, even though after afternoon spent in a lab watching Drosophila flies mate. I can tell you that passion was very quickly looking at microscopes and cells and all that stuff. But I think for me, it was never really a grounded path. And, if there's any advice I can give to people listening is always question why you're doing something. Simon Sinek wrote a brilliant book, Start With Why. At that young age, you never started with why. You just started with what would it give you? What was the outcome? Like we've talked about the familiarity and the safety. So I dropped out after 2 days. I did biochemistry for 3 years, and then realized that I didn't want to do an internship in banking or whatever else people wanted to do. I actually loved university because you got the opportunity to do lots of things and play sport and go to lots of parties. The parties are really, really fun, even now. And so I then applied to grad medicine at Cambridge, and my parents, luckily, thank you for listening if they are, agreed to pay the top-up fees for that. So for me, it was never a formulated path. And I think that's transpired through my career. I was always involved in different businesses. At the time, there was an event management startup that I was involved in. Then I moved on to Cambridge and, was involved in various little kind of side hustles, as you'd call them today. And even now, this year I've got a new side hustle coming in. So I think it's always been part of my personality, and maybe it's the ADD, maybe it's something else. But yeah, I was never fully focused head down.
So if we put a pin in the side hustles, because I'd love to explore that a bit more, but I didn't realize this, but you had a place in medicine and then you decided to do biochemistry, but then you opted after the degree to go into graduate medicine. Can you talk us through that thinking?
Yeah, so there were three main factors driving that. One was I realized a career in biochemistry and academia wasn't for me. I think that's the first point. If the degree you're doing isn't leading to a vocation and field, then you've got to change track. The second was I fortunately or unfortunately graduated in the middle of the recession, the first one. And that was hard because it meant the job market was hard. It meant internships were hard. I did secure a banking internship, but I'm not a quantitative person by nature. So I didn't want to do that. And then again, you go back to what you know most and what you feel familiar with. And so it was medicine. Third factor at that point also was I was a little bit more mature, so I understood what medicine entailed. And pursuing medicine the second time for me was more about the subject matter and the curiosity I had for the human body rather than being able to treat and deliver interventions that, cure diseases and save lives. And so for me, again, at that point, a traditional course like Cambridge made sense, or Oxford, because I was fascinated by the fact I get to spend 2 days a week, 2 afternoons a week in a dissection lab with a real body. It sounds weird, sounds a bit creepy, but I love that. And we got to spend all that time with a real brain and dissect a brain. So for me, the second time going into medicine was more about the subject matter because I understood more about that, having interacted with medics at university and done overlapping courses with them through the biochemistry degree, etc. Than it was the first time.
So you came back into graduate entry medicine and you started to tinker even then.
Yeah.
What made you think of these things? Because a lot of medics just kind of go all in on the degree and kind of start to go down the traditional routes of academia, teaching, audits, all this kind of portfolio related. But you start to say you events, companies, etc. What made you think of doing these type of things?
It's a really good question. I think I don't want to put everything down to ADD, but I think naturally an output or an outcome of ADD is that you want to do many things. You can't really focus on one thing wholly. And so that distraction was always there. I think also realizing that at that age that, I have an older brother who isn't medical or scientific or involved in anything medical related. At both Imperial and Cambridge, you had the opportunity to mix with other, groups of people that had very different career paths and trajectories. And particularly at Cambridge, where you live on college site.
Yeah.
You're constantly interacting with people doing all sorts of things like, sustainability or, PhDs in fields you haven't even heard of. You have professional athletes and, around you the whole time. You have lawyers. And so I think all of that put together gave you that opportunity to learn more about the world that you would have done as a school child and be less exam focused and more on kind of where the growth mindset that, we all talk about today. I think for me, I've got to be honest, I think medicine was really, really interesting, but I wasn't ever really good at it.
Okay.
I'm not a rote learner and I'm not someone who can, pick up lots of information really, really quickly. I'm very detailed orientated and very focused on the creative side of things. So hence where I am today in everything I do. So I think the side hustles allowed me to explore those avenues of creativity more than medicine did.
Do you think those outlets actually helped you get through the medical degree? Without it, you may have just kind of lost all interest, lost the focus. But these outlets gave you another perspective, which kind of was a breath of fresh air that then meant you could then come back to medicine, continue the studies, get through the exams, because they are tough. They're not a walk in the park.
Yeah, I think so. I was always a crammer. And I think what the outlets do is allow you to feel more whole as a person. And, exams are easier to pass when you feel good in yourself and you feel confident and you can focus and study and you have good mental health. And so I think those outlets were my way of ensuring that I had the right physical and mental health in order to pass those exams. All of them, loads of them that we had to do.
It's really interesting to hear this actually, because both myself and Mohammed, being from different medical schools, also pursued various different side hustles. And I really like the way that you worded it, which is that it was a creative outlet.
Yeah.
Because I think similarly, and I've never thought about it this way, it did make me feel better about myself because I wasn't the strongest academically. So it made me feel more rounded. It gave me energy. And even though those projects, they had varying different degrees of success, they made the whole kind of student experience way more enriching.
Yeah. And if you think about it, Jing, just taking up on that, when you apply to medical school, right, you have to be, even today, you have to be top of your class. but you have to be doing sports and drama and music and community and volunteering and DOV and all of those things. So to then go into medical school and lose all those multifaceted, avenues that were an outlet or, made you the person you are is quite linear, and quite suffocating. So I'm not surprised to see, both of you did it. I'm a little bit older than both of you, just a little bit, but equally, I'm not surprised to see so many medics today do it. And I really encourage it. The portfolio career or the different avenues or the less than full-time working, that means that you have better physical and mental health at the end of it. It's brilliant. I think it's the way forward.
No, it's crazy when you put like it's like so true. You do all this extracurricular stuff to get in, and then as soon as you get in, most medics drop it. Like they drop their music, they drop volunteering. They're like, now I'm in, I have to get out. And it's actually so true. I just realized, wait a minute, I did all this stuff to get in.
Yeah.
And then I did zero of it once I got in.
Yeah.
So what was the whole point of all these outlets? Like medicine made me hate reading because I just had to read to memorize, and I enjoyed reading beforehand. It's actually so enlightening the way you mentioned it, Anushka. Like you do all this stuff, but then you seem to forget it once you're in. So you did all this stuff, Anushka. You've got through medicine. You've got your degree now. When we were doing your background reading, we noted you were like an academic foundation doctor. Your house job was in surgery. And then you entered into radiology training. As a radiologist myself, I do have to ask, what made you pursue radiology of all the specialties?
Okay, I'm going to give you an answer that I say all the time. People laugh and they think I'm taking the piss. Am I allowed to say piss on this podcast?
Yeah, of course you can.
Just done it.
Yeah.
It is genuinely because I didn't like blood. Let's leave it at that. I actually genuinely don't like blood. I've had events where I've fallen over myself and, unfortunately like cut my chin or been bleeding, and I freak out myself, over it. So I don't like blood, and I'm doing surgery. Not a good start, right? I genuinely, and I don't mean this in a way that is disparaging, but I don't like people. It takes a lot for me to really like people and, be around people and work with people. And a lot of people won't see that because I practice this extra intro balance and energy. And, when Jim will tell you that, when we're socializing, I look like I like everyone, but naturally I am not a people person. And so you put me in a people facing environment. We have to work across different cultures, different education backgrounds, different, environments, different locations, because medicine, you're always moving around. And then you add on blood to that. Or, bodily substances which you get covered in. And it just didn't work. It didn't work. So radiology was a good escape because it meant you could hide in a dark room away from people. I did a little bit of interventional, and I really enjoyed interventional radiology because the patient wasn't talking back to you in most instances. Very helpful. But I'm not joking when I say this. It just really never fit. It wasn't right. And I like doing stuff with my hands. But right now, the things I do with my hands are playing piano during the day, or, as I said to you guys before we came on live, DJing, right? Or producing music versus cutting someone open or holding a retractor, as it often is in the early days.
No, I think like you're preaching to the choir when it comes to me and why I went into radiology. People do laugh and they kind of get a bit taken aback, like, but you're a doctor. It's like, yeah, we are doctors, but we're different, like personality. There are personalities behind the doctor. Yeah. And I really wanted to enjoy GP. I really tried. But I couldn't get past half the morning clinic without being like, I'm done. So I think radiology for me was the natural progression, in the sense that same as you, Anushka, I enjoy the disease more than necessarily the impact. And I want to try and understand. So that was why but like I said, it is nice to hear a fellow-minded
radiologist, someone who
Yeah.
likes the dark. Also, Mohammed, like radiology gives you autonomy. So, I always think that each part, and when I mentor medics leaving, I just think pick up the puzzle pieces, right? Because you don't wake up one day and say, I'm leaving medicine. You just don't. You have little puzzle pieces or little hints along the way, and it's up to you to solve the problem, put it together. And my puzzle piece of radiology was I loved the autonomy. I liked having a screen and being able to solve problems. Unsurprisingly, I'm, chief product officer kind of role, data role, kind of autonomous in my role, all of these things are little puzzle pieces, which I was able to then put together to build the career I have today. But if you ignore those puzzle pieces or you choose not to recognize and acknowledge them, that's when you find that you see, medics who are very discognizant with who they are in their work life and who they are, out of work. And the happiness index falls quite quickly when you have that discongruence.
And you were in radiology only for a few years before then leaving. What was your motivation for leaving? Why didn't you continue?
Really simply, don't want to do any exams. Hated radiology when I was doing it. I know it's changed since then, but I had so many more exams.
Yeah, your modular format. Yeah.
Yeah, and I honestly, I was done. I was totally done. I just couldn't be bothered. And that's a really bad reason, but I just didn't want to do it. I think that plus, I just remember one particular night shift, right, at King's College Hospital, honestly broke. It was a straw that broke the camel's back. And this tells you a little bit about me. Like people always say that, like, and don't get me wrong, like I can put a backpack on and climb a mountain tomorrow and not shower for a week, right? Like I can do that. But I like the comforts of life. I like a really
Okay.
easy life. But this particular night shift, so I drive my car in. We were already told not to drive our cars in, but it was late, it was winter, it's Denmark Hill, who's going to bother getting a train, whatever. So I drive my car in, I park illegally down not illegally, but like down a side street, walk through the hospital, into the hospital, already dark. I'm already scaring myself. I don't like the dark. I get freaked out with horror movies and whatnot. So I'm like walking into the hospital. Louis Theroux's at the front entrance, and he's like,
Okay.
his production crew are like, you can't go this way because we're filming something for a documentary he's doing. You got to go around the back entrance of the hospital. And I'm thinking, are you joking? Like, A, I'm already late for my night shift. B, I'm wearing scrubs and no jacket. It's cold. Shouldn't be doing that, but whatever. C, I've got to walk around the back of Denmark Hill on my own at night. And I'm pretty small as a human being, as Jing would probably tell you for meeting me in person. I don't want to be doing this. And then you get into the hospital, and like from the minute you enter the hospital, security's shouting at you, or the porter's shouting at you, or you can't get into the lift because something else is there. And then you get up to the ward and someone else is shouting at you, and the patient's shouting at you. And the radiographer's like, why are you late? And you're like, do you know what I've had to go through to get here? And then, then you're like, oh my God, my food's in the car and there's nothing open. And, I need a kind of Coke because I love drinking fizzy drinks and it's not available. You sit down and the reg is handing over to you and then the consultant comes, it was just like absolute chaos. And I remember just getting in and sitting down at my desk in radiology in the dark room and just being like, I think about 7 or 8 people have spoken to me in a way that made me feel so much less human than I feel today. And that at the time of the doctors' protest,
Yeah.
where there's lots of other career opportunities because your friends are all doing different things. It just broke me. I was like, I can't do this. And that, I think that is the main reason I left the exams, and being in an environment that didn't speak to adding value to myself as an individual, didn't align to my values and how I want to be treated. And also that just didn't work for me. Because if you're not happy where you are, you're never going to be able to succeed. And I think that's one of the big things in anything you do.
When you mention exams, is so funny. It makes me recall kind of my decision making. And I think I wouldn't have been so committed to starting patchwork if I'd passed my MRCP part 2. Because I'd failed that and I was like, oh bloody hell, I don't want to resit that. And I'd completely botched it because I decided during lunch to get a KFC. And basically for the second half of that exam, I was like completely out of it. But then you pay so much money for this exam, and it's a whole day. You have to like drive to the exam place. It's like I think it was like a 6-hour exam with a break in between. And I just thought to myself, God, I'm not going to progress. Like, I'm not going to pass my MRCP part 2. So it's, when you describe that, I thought, oh, it's really giving me flashbacks.
My flashback thing is sitting in the radiology exam, having, oh my God, if my parents are listening to this or anyone else, having gone out to fabric the night before, and I totally blame my cousin for this because he was in London at the time, gone out to fabric the night before, so finished fabric at 7 a.m., then gone to a radiology exam at 9 a.m., and sitting in the exam and just going A, B, C, oh D, it must be F. Oh, it's C. Oh no, I put 4 C's, it might be A. Unsurprisingly, fail, but realization that I wasn't happy. You don't go to fabric till 7 a.m. if you're happy.
Yeah.
No, it's just like, if you guys can see, there's my FRCR in the background. As someone who didn't pass the exams, all of them first time, it's that motivation. Like if you don't have that why, as you said at the beginning, Anushka, sitting for a post-grad exam after a long day on calls, whatever, it's not like medical school where your year is designed for an exam. Training is not designed for an exam. Training is designed for service provision or training. It's really tough. And I see a lot of posts on Reddit, social media forums, where there's disrespect towards doctors, and this lack of just politeness and just treating them as humans has really pushed doctors to really think about careers now. A lot of people now migrating to Australia, New Zealand, because they just say, I feel like I'm treated with respect. Forget the pay, that's also an element. but it's just being treated like a human being who has a lot of responsibility. Like when you're on nights as a radiologist, you are making real life or death decisions, like go to theater, it's normal, it's abnormal. So when you're not even getting like time to get a can of Coke, you're just like, why am I here? What I could be doing so much with all these transferable skills. So I really understand and appreciate like your thinking as to why I need to leave.
So that was the push factor of leaving medicine. What did you jump into? What was the pull factor?
And you'd ask that. To be honest, the pull factor was money and better life.
Mm,
At the time, that was when, and things have changed a lot now, but that was when management consultants, strategy consultants, bankers were all on six-figure salaries. They were getting perks like corporate bonuses and, not necessarily having to work weekends or not admitting to working weekends. They weren't missing funerals, weddings, day parties, nights out, sunny days, all of the things that we as medics were missing.
mm,
And, the pull factor was I can have a better life, get paid more, and, thankfully dress nicer and not be covered in sweat, blood, urine, whatever it was that we got covered in, and to Mohammed's point, I could be respected and talked to in a nice way. And I think a lot of the toxicity in healthcare, unfortunately, today comes from healthcare workers to each other. But that's because the pressure and, the government and the structure and everything else is, the waiting lists and the demand and the capacity mismatch has built up over time. But there is fundamentally an issue within medicine where there is still bullying, there is still, ragging, there is still behaviors which wouldn't be absolutely unacceptable in any other environment. Most other environments have human resources that get in and end that stuff. So for me, the pull factor was better life, more money, which is really, it's a really bad thing to admit, but hey, look, if you're living in central London or your partner is living in central London and earning 4 or 5 times as much as you are, or your friends are, it doesn't even have to be your partner, your friends are, or your siblings are, and you look at that and you're like, actually breaking emotionally, physically, and unable to cry, then, that times needs to be called. So yeah, during the right
Very
channel
true.
for that.
And then when you left medicine, you took on a variety of different roles, some of which in consultancy and also explored other areas. How did you find that adaptation? Was that easy for you?
It's a really great question. So I would say it was the toughest thing I've ever done. And my first 2 employers would say the exact same thing because it takes a long time to get out of the rhetoric of medicine. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So as a doctor, you get promoted every year till you get to consultant level, right? You pass the ARCP or the process. Most people pass unless you do something completely ad hoc and wrong, and you get promoted every year. Your salary goes up a little bit every year. Someone tells you what you need to accomplish in terms of the tasks. You know exactly what you need to do. Your day is structured in a way that you know where you need to be, what you need to learn, how to pass the exams. You don't have any of that in the real working world. That's all down to you to set. You set your own goals, you set your own targets. You might have a little bit of structure as a consultant and oversight, but a lot of the work is down to you learning, growing, and being able to then display and demonstrate that. And a lot of people, when you come out of medicine, medicine's quite homogenous. You come out, it's very heterogeneous, not only in terms of culture, but ways of working, styles, intellect, problem-solving ability, emotional intelligence, cultural backgrounds, all of that. And taking on all of that information and being able to deal with it as a medic coming out of medicine is really, really hard. So I got fired from my first job. Fired isn't the right word. Made redundant. But hey, I got paid for an extra 3 months to find a better job. But it wasn't the right fit. But did I think about fit when I got offered that job? No, I thought about impressing them and getting a job that would pay my bills. No one talks to you about cultural fit in medicine because you don't have a choice of where you go and who you work with. You get thrown in. But in the real world, you do. You build, up the knowledge that you choose who you work with, what type of company, what type of working style, even down to who's on your team when you get to a level senior enough where you pick who you work with. So yeah, I think that was a big factor. I found it really difficult. I really struggled, got made redundant for my first role, and then found a role that balanced out some of the aspects of medicine, so the clinical, the scientific, with consulting. So my first role, for anyone listening, was in innovation consulting and working on projects like for telecommunications brands. I had no idea what those brands did, and that industry or sector. So I'd say when you step out of medicine, my advice to anyone listening would be try and find what you like about medicine and put that into your first role out of medicine. I know some of my colleagues and friends, they've gone out of medicine and they've gone into like fashion, but this has to be an incremental step. Otherwise things break down very quickly and that can be quite soul destroying.
I mean, that was, I really appreciate the honesty in that. And I think it's really important to highlight how the grass is sometimes not always greener. A lot of our kind of medical colleagues who work in the NHS today will complain about the bureaucracy and the hierarchy and the pay. But then on the other side of the fence, there's real job risk, and it's very kind of meritocratic in a sense that, you may not always get promoted. You may actually be let go. And that is tough when all you've known is the conveyor belt of medicine. So I think it's certainly something for our audience to consider. And it's a really important point to highlight.
One thing I want to ask you, Anushka, is you've mentioned that there was the certain pull factors, and it was like money, wealth, respect, lifestyle, etc. And then you made the transition. When you made the transition from medicine as a radiology registrar to non-medic, were there any resources or networks or tools that really like helped you with this? Or was it kind of like you were just finding your own feet as and when you made the decisions?
Great question. So the resources have just got bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more and more since I left. I can't believe I can say this, but it's 13 years ago I left, nearly to the day. But in essence, I think at the time I looked at things like doctorpreneurs, so societies that allow doctors or facilitate doctors doing other things that exist now in various factions, either at university level or in community levels. I think the second area that I helped or looked at, I think that helped me a lot, was LinkedIn, because LinkedIn opens up a wealth of information around different people, different characters, different roles, different learning. And it's developed so much in the last 13 years. But at the time, even just having a LinkedIn profile, no doctor had it. Even today, I think less than 50% of doctors have it, but it's such a great networking tool. So I was able to, through LinkedIn, get every single job I have got out of medicine almost without applying for any, because people have seen your profile, they look at your network, and then you say, hey, look, I heard you've got a role. And then, you fast track your way in because you know similar people or you've done your research. So I think doing your research and meeting people from different areas that you might be interested in and networking. I know a lot of people look at networking as an onerous task, but a lot of doctors also don't know how to network. My friends who are still in medicine, they don't understand what networking is. They don't get it, And I think, just highlighting that to your listeners and anyone really who's looking for a career, whether it is out of medicine or out of something, networking and understanding the role and the people within it is your biggest asset when you go into kind of looking for something else.
While we're on the subject of LinkedIn, you are one of the people who has a very authentic voice on LinkedIn. You post a lot, but you're very prominent on LinkedIn. Is this something that you've been curating kind of consciously, or is this something spontaneous? And has that really helped you in your career?
Great question. So it's been spontaneous, and that's why I go like that when you say authentic. It's evolving. I've learned the most I've ever learned in my life about myself coming out of a really traumatic situation 2.5 years ago, where I totally lost myself and, went to a very, very, very dark place. And so I think in the last 2 years, my evolution of being able to speak out and talk about subjects that matter to me, and what you're referring to, Jing, and I love the fact you are, as authentic, has come from being able to fix areas that I felt in me needed fixing. And that's an investment. It's a time investment in things like therapy, things like understanding why you are the way you are, why you believe you've let yourself down. What are the pressures? We alluded it to the part that your parents, your society, or have put on you. Why are you not, feeling great every morning, waking up feeling gratitude when you've got quite a lot going for you? All of those factors came into play in the last 2.5 years of my life. And I think so through that, my voice in LinkedIn has become a lot more prominent and a lot more, as you say, authentic. But earlier on when I was on LinkedIn, and you know what, I wasn't on it to be a certain person. I was actually on it just to get to meet different people out of the medical environment, and just to understand what roles other people did and what it, what does it entail? Because even now, my partner still asks me, like, what do you do all day? And I'm like, what do you do all day? Right. You don't really know what people do all day. People can kind of, you can guess it and stuff, but you don't really know till you put yourself in their shoes or you have a conversation with them. And that's what I say to people who want to leave medicine or any other field, like go have a coffee with 10 people in that field at different levels as well, right? Because it always looks really rosy at the top, but actually sometimes it's rosier at the bottom than it is at the top. And then Mohammed, to your other point, I think reading books, you alluded to the fact we've stopped reading books we're in medicine because we don't have time, or we believe we don't have time. But reading books is so critical, not only to growth, but also skill development. So I remember picking up a book that's still on my shelf today around how do you read a financial account? because I never knew how to do that basic skill, and I remember reading that and thinking, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember reading a book called Sprint, which is how do you launch a digital product, and thinking, oh, that's cool. And there's a great book that's really short called Still Like an Artist, which is about evoking creativity. What if the innovation consulting firm wrote a lot of books on innovation? So I think, just picking up those pockets, and now more and more, you've got leaders like Adam Grant and Dan Ariely and Simon Sinek and, so many others writing books on business or business mindset or, various different areas, thought leadership pieces that can influence then the decisions you make.
No, you've mentioned some really golden nuggets, Anushka, which we're going to like clickbait later on, but in post-production. But I think two of the things that I really want to reinforce is, number one, identity. In our last podcast, it was this element of doctors losing their identity when they transition out. Because for 5 years minimum, you're told you are a doctor. In house job, it's reinforced. Then in specialty training, if you do it, it's reinforced. And when you start to think of pastures new, you're like, but am I still a doctor? Am I still that person? And trying to come to terms with who you will be, I think can be quite challenging when all your life you're told what to be, which is a doctor. And I think when I started to connect with you on LinkedIn through Jing, Anushka, I think the things I really liked about your posts is that it was very raw, is how I would put it, very open and raw. And when you look at the engagement, it's like people are saying, thank you for articulating what I'm thinking. Like, you've had the guts to say what I want to say, but I don't feel I can say. And I think thirdly, the big one, which me and Jing kind of started to appreciate quite early on in medical school, was leverage. I think medics, when they start to think about leaving medicine, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anushka, is that they think everyone will just want them. Yes and no. Yes, you do have transferable skills. You are a hard worker by definition as a medic, but you got to have something more. Like, you can't just expect people to be like, yo, we'll hire you because of an MBCHP as a writer for this or whatever. And I think one things that we like try and encourage our audience is leverage your networks, build your networks, even if it's clinical, even if like I'm a radiologist, build a radiology network that you can socialize with, bounce ideas off. But just going in blind is quite risky.
So I totally agree. And I'm going to tell you my ABCDE, which is authenticity. I love the fact, and you literally nearly brought me to tears, which is really sad, but I love the fact that you recognize that vulnerability I'm able to show. It's taken me a long time to get there. But I think when you feel comfortable in your own skin, and God, it's taken me till the age of 36 and a half, as I said, events had triggered it and catalyzed it. But I think that authenticity is really, really important. And that authenticity is tied to identity. So Mohammed, I would say to your listeners, like, don't be scared to get therapy or executive coaching or speak to people, because medics bring so much baggage on, like, how much they've carried through medicine and, I can't be vulnerable. But actually being vulnerable has meant that I've made so many more deep connections. And when you have a deep connection, it means someone will serve you as much as you'll serve them. And reciprocated deep connections is honestly the way to go in any kind of existence. At least I believe so. The B is boldness, right? So be brave and bold, because you're going to make mistakes coming out of medicine just like you do in medicine. And I think for me, being brave and bold to say, I'm going to try something that's completely out of medicine is one thing, but then to do something that, you don't leverage your skills and everything else is, it's okay to make that mistake. But I think being brave and bold, I always say, is curiosity, because so many medics and other people write to me and they're like, how did you build your career? Can we have like half an hour with you? Can we have an hour with you? And I'm like, it's not that I mind giving my time away, but like, please just go and be curious yourself first. Right? Because if you're not curious, then you're kidding yourself that this is going to work for you. So be curious, like constantly be curious, constantly asking questions, constantly be like, if you're not really, really excited by it. And today, one of my best friends asked me on text, what are you most excited about today? And I was like, oh my God, this podcast. But, like it is really like, you have to be curious. It has to excite you. My D is don't bring ego, because that's the one thing I see with medics. They either think that because of who they are and where they've got to. And I've coached consultants leaving medicine, which you'd never believe, even though now I'm like consultant age, which is scary. But you know what I mean? Like they bring ego, and 5 or 6 of the sessions are like breaking down ego. And I think when you leave something like medicine, which is quite a hierarchical field still, quite journalistic in so many ways, particularly like things like surgery still are, let's call it out, right? There's a lot of bullying, like I said earlier, and there's a lot of cultural, improvements that can be made in the medical field, if you bring that ego into an environment, like Jing said, you're gonna come against barriers, and you're not gonna make life easy for you. Hey, look, I brought ego to my first role. I thought I was the be all and end all. It was a role that allowed us to have flexible working hours. So it was 10 to 4 in the office. The rest of the time, did what you want. You could wear what you wanted. And for me, like, being in at 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. meant that's all I did. I take an hour for lunch because I never got an hour for lunch as a medic. So, my productivity was down to 5 hours. I was dressed in a way that didn't bring value to myself, because a lot of medics, the way we used to dress was part of our identity. And, I'm not surprised it spiraled out of control, and I was absolutely SHIT at that job. So, I think that's, back to your piece about identity and everything else. I think don't bring ego, and work out for yourself what your identity levers are, and what matters to you. A lot of medics are too scared to actually admit what matters to them. And like I said to you at the start, what mattered to me then was lifestyle and money, and wealth. And I'm not ashamed to say that today. I probably was 10 years ago.
Wow. Really, really powerful stuff. It's going to feel like an awkward segue now to start talking about health insurance. So I guess you had all these kind of early experiences in your career, and you explored different things. And I think it sounds like you've grown a lot through these different roles. You then eventually settled into health insurance, and you started working in that field. So what was it about that I guess that domain and those roles that was kind of rewarding, and then and that encouraged then your progression?
Great question. So I'll give you 2 seconds on, well, not 2 seconds, a little bit more than 2 seconds on how I got into health insurance. There was a job called, I can't remember what it was called, like commercial manager or a proposition lead or something like that in population health, digital health at Aetna International, that a gentleman advertised. You can look on my LinkedIn or Google to find out who that gentleman was. And that was pivotal in my career, because the job was advertised. I knew the person through a network. This person went to school with my brother, but was 10 years older than my brother. So saw this job advertised on LinkedIn, had no idea what chief of staff meant, which was the job title, population health meant, really didn't know anything about analytics, didn't even know what Aetna International was, or was it Aetna, or was it Aetna, who knew, right? Didn't even really know what health insurance was, but it just sounded so cool. Honestly, it just sounded so cool. And I was like, you know what, that sounds like someone who's got skin in the game. So interviewed for the job, not knowing very much. And through that realized that actually I did know some of the things that I needed to know for that job. And I was going to jump and take the risk, and it paid off. And that got me into health insurance. And I think the thing that kept me in health insurance, which is probably more exciting, is health insurance is a field that is ever evolving, because you have capital to serve the people you need to. So you get a better match than you do in the NHS. You have more control, because you have things called actuaries that control spend and risk and everything else. And then you get to be innovative, because basically it's a competitive market. It's not like the NHS. You have to win business every year. And it is every year, because you renew your health insurance annually, not like life insurance. People tend to stay with life insurance for life. Health insurance you renew annually. So every year you have to come up with new propositions, new ways of selling, new modes, better customer service, all of those things that make health insurance a successful business. And then it's a business that is in financial services. So you've got a little bit of, that swag to it. But it's not boring banking, and you get to play with lots of data, which is like the main reason. At the time, I really wanted to copy my brother, which is something I've done my whole life, and learn data and be a data scientist. And I felt like it was just like really fun playing with data. And health insurance, you get to play with the data, you get access to data, you get to build models, you get to think about how better to serve your customers and look at, telemedicine utilization or cancer, or bring in digital solutions, or find those digital solutions before you even bring them in. And so it was all of that putting together that kept me in it. It was something that changed every year, because your role, remit, and proposition changed every year. You could be creative, because you could put things together that you never thought you could, or would. And you worked in a place that still made people better. So you didn't feel as bad as you probably would have felt if you went into something like banking. So yeah, that was it. And I was very, very lucky, because I worked in an international arm of an American insurer, which meant I got to travel the world and work in so many different geographies. Like, I spent a week in Phoenix, Arizona, which was so cool. And then the week after, I went to South Korea. And that was even better, right? Because it's a completely different health system and working with different cultural dynamics, and different data. So I think that was awesome. And the travel and learning different health systems kept me in. And then vitality was, I can't say this, so I should say it. I don't know what I can. Well, I'll say it anyway. It was even better, because it was working in a business that really loved to incentivize you to be healthy and be fit. Two of the things that matter most to me in the world is being healthy and be fit. I'm an addict to anything that's fitness related. So the fact I could work somewhere that everyone else was tracking their steps and points and, really, really bought into that prevention methodology, or longevity, as it's now called, was awesome.
I think it's fair enough to say that it was better simply by virtue of the promotion that you received, because you became C-suite essentially. It was deputy chief medical officer. Is that right?
Yeah, but you know what, Jing? Titles are meaningless. And again, like something I've realized in the last 2 years, I think for most people, even in medicine, you would probably be like, oh my God, I need to be a consultant before I quit. And the amount of times I hear people say that, and I'm like, but if you're miserable right now,
Yeah.
you're going to become a consultant. And I have so many people in my network today who may be listening to this podcast that have got to that consultant level. They're still miserable, or they're still unhappy, or still things aren't adding up. And hey, look, like, for some people it does get better, but you can't base your life on a title. Your life is so finite. And I think it's what I've learned to appreciate is the memories, the experience, the day-to-day, the growth, the learning, and the people and connections you make. It's not a title.
No, yeah, I
C-suite
totally
is
agree.
not, yeah. You know what I mean? C-suite's cool to everyone else, but when you're there, you're still around.
Yeah.
I always used to say this when I went into like any meeting, and when I used to freak out, you're presenting at really big meetings with clients or whatever. It's like, think about your heart and my heart. Cut our bodies open, put our hearts on the table. You probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference, because everyone has the same heart. So just think about people as people, not as, a title.
Yeah, and I think there's this like sunk cost fallacy. Like, no, I've got to finish what I've started, even though I'm miserable doing it. It's like, well, it's like a band-aid. The slower you rip it off, the more painful it's going to be. So just do what you think is unthinkable, which is to just rip it off and see if those pastures new are better for you. So one thing I want to ask you, Anushka, alongside this role within health insurance, you took a role within the UN, the United Nations. Can you tell us about how you landed such a role? Because I think everyone listening in will be like, how does somebody get into the UN? What was the process like?
It's so easy to get into the UN. So
Okay.
we have an internet, we have Google UN, loads of careers, loads of advisory roles, loads of opportunities to secondments. I was really lucky. A close friend of mine who, so how did it happen? I'll be honest. Me and a friend decided to invest in Bitcoin. Very, very.
Well, where's this going?
Yeah. Well, we kind of we were interested in blockchain at the time, and we invested in Bitcoin. And made a lot of money on it. But by investing in Bitcoin, you learn a lot about blockchain, and we learn about the kind of implications of blockchain that could have been, or would have been, or might be one day, because it never really truly reached its fruition. It's now called Web3 in healthcare. And we started talking to people on the subject, and lo and behold, that year the UN wanted to publish a paper. So the UN Economic Commission wanted to publish a paper on blockchain, AI, and other things like data in healthcare. So we said, hey, look, we know a lot about the subject. Did we? No, because no one was an expert at the time, but we'll be your experts. We got involved. We published a paper, a white paper, working with loads of other stakeholders. And then you get access to loads of other things in the UN, and you get access to leadership groups, teams, policies, and you get brought into subjects. But there are loads of roles at the UN. You can always be an expert advisor, just have to find the right team. You can always contribute to white papers. You can involve yourself in groups that are changing policy. I just think people get scared really quickly. And again, it goes back to my point. Titles scare people, but titles are nothing, right? It's like, yeah, don't be scared. Be bold.
I mean, it's so refreshing to hear that, because the assumption that I think most people would make, including myself, is, wow, the UN, that's like, so intimidating. Like, who knows what kind of interrogation process takes place to, get any kind of role, albeit fractional or...
Yeah, they do. You get your whole like identity scanned and your fingerprints say no. I mean, there is security, but there's security in any job, right? Even outside medicine, you have to do a criminal whatever check, references
DBS,
and all that. And now even social media, they scan your social media and stuff. So it's not.
No, I think one thing which is like resonating throughout the 50 minutes we've been recording from you, Anushka, is you really have this like fearless attitude. You're very bold in the sense that you'll see an opportunity and be like, why not? What's the worst that will happen? I'll get rejected. I think a lot of medics are very risk averse. I definitely am. And they see it and be like, no, not yet. I'll do it when I'm a consultant, or I'll do it when I'm whatever. It's like, why? What's the difference? Like, you as a consultant and you now, what's the difference? So I think just being like, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? The UN will reject me. But the best on the flip side is that you get offered to contribute towards a white paper. So just have a go.
But also, if you build the network before you even apply, and you
Yeah.
know the people, and you have the passion and the dedication and to actually invest in those people, people will fight your case and be your champion. And there's no better way to get a job than having champions that champion you and support you. You know, even earlier this week, I contacted Jim for some help and advice, and he was happy to give it to me because we built that relationship and we've invested time in each other, albeit over pints and. But you know, I think we undermine that, and a lot of medics are very transactional because we have to be in our day job, and then you come out of your day job into your night job or your personal life, and you are still transactional.
Yeah.
And we need to break that and cultivate a different mindset. And transactional relationships is not how the world operates
Definitely.
anymore. And it's funny you say that I'm very risk taking. I'm going to be honest, there's obviously enablers of that, right? You have, don't take risks if you could lose your house, for example, or you could be on the streets, or you can't pay your bills. But if you set yourself up to take those, like I said at the start, the incremental risks. I started with very, very small risks. Now I do take much bigger risks, but it's because I started with the small risks and tried out and understood and learned. And I think, yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, well, starting with Bitcoin and then getting to the UN, what a, trying to grasp that from a risk perspective. But while we're on the subject of, I guess, of courage, you then at some point decided to start your own business. So you took the leap from corporate leadership and founded a business. So do you want to talk us through that?
So the truth is I didn't found the business. My two co-founders, Javed and Vaibhav, who are incredible humans based out in Dubai, founded the business. And we became friends through a fortuitous meeting with Vaibhav in London, actually, where I was at Vitality and he wanted to pitch WellEx to Vitality. And I actually wanted to pitch me joining WellEx to him. And again, over a pint and building a really deep relationship in that one meeting. Formed a really great friendship, and he and Javed brought me on board to WellEx as the third co-founder. Would I have done that on my own and founded a business on my own? Yeah, probably. I've always thought of I would do, but it just happened. And I think the catalyst behind it was being in business school at the time, and I went into business school wanting to be a C-suite exec at a listed company. 3 weeks into business school, I got offered the Vitality role, and then the pandemic hit, and everyone's priorities changed, mine included. And through business school, I realized that, corporate is great for some people, but again, it wasn't the right cultural fit for me. And each point, working through my mindset with an executive coach, just saying, really being honest with myself, who am I and what do I want to be and what's my identity and what's driving me? I've got more and more and more clear on what that is. And it wasn't, that chief medical officer role of Vitality. And ironically, Mohammed and Jing, going back to this first point, as I got more and more clear, because I asked myself more and more difficult questions, I've come further away from why I joined medicine in the first place. Because I've started to, in the course of my life, is take away the external factors influencing my decision making, whether it's your parents or society or and that's a hard mold to break, particularly as a female. You have loads of other pressures that other people, males might not have. But I started to take away all of that just by really working on my mind and my thought processes and, how I process information. And your negative narrative voice, which everyone has, however loud it might be at times. And so I love that step by step again that's brought me to today. I don't think you can just jump into things, because if you jump into things, you feel like the rug's been pulled out under you, whereas I don't feel like that.
Do you feel like there were fresh challenges going from, having been on that journey from medicine into a non-medical career, but then now going from a non-medical career to becoming, essentially the third co-founder of this growing startup? Were there any kind of challenges and learnings along the way?
Yeah, I think, again, with each step, structure was lost, right? So medicine to corporate structures different. Corporate to entrepreneurship structure is different. And with each step, the uncertainty is greater. And so I think that then had a massive impact on things like sleep and health. And so the first challenge was, how do I create time for the things I love or that make me me, like going to the gym every day or sleeping? Often I love to sleep like 12 hours a day if I could. But people in my friendship group say I'm half woman, half mattress, which I love because that sounds cozy. But, those kind of things. So you learn to then prioritize what's important to you. I also think the challenge of being an entrepreneur, and Jing, you'll know this firsthand, is, oh my God, can I pay my bills next month? Are we still going to be alive? is someone going to reject us? Are we going to make money? Is someone going to want to buy us? And also when when you're an entrepreneur, both, at Mindstep and WellEx, we always think about everyone else in our team, because you're a leadership team of a startup. You come second all of a sudden. Your team come first. So all of those uncertainties come into play. There's a fantastic book called The Entrepreneur's Roller Coaster, and that is what it is. So I would say to anyone who is experiencing any change in life and journey is just be prepared for the roller coaster. And my one bit of advice is have your non-negotiables ready and enforce them, because someone else will take them away from you otherwise. And for me, my non-negotiables include my support network. You can't just do a lot of this stuff on your own, even though most people want to make people think they can. You have to have the right support network, and whether that's financial, emotional, social, spiritual, whatever dimension it is, you have to have that in place, and you have to have your non-negotiables.
Yeah, that's really really powerful. And then more recently, you left your role at WellEx to go into a different startup. How was that? Because, as entrepreneurs, it can be very difficult to step away from something when you've been there right from, the early days. And I think certainly for many entrepreneurs, their identities are kind of wrapped into their startups. Like, what was it like making that decision?
So it's a great question. And it's even harder when that startup's based in Dubai and you can go to the beach and it's sunny weather. Well, tax-free, all those things. But I think I'm going to answer this question in hopefully not a way that you think I'm going about it in a roundabout way, but I believe in this philosophy called relationship check-ins, and that's personal, professional, or a relationship with yourself check-in. And, that's romantic, non-romantic, yourself, parental, whatever relationship, right? Just put it in your diary that the relationships that matter to you most in the world, yourself being the most important one, you check in. Because it's so easy to just kind of just follow suit or do the same thing again and again and again without realizing it's either making you unhappy or that you're not being true to yourself. Something's changed in you. And for me, that relationship check-in piece, and I've got a really awesome checklist. So if anyone wants it from this podcast, just ping me. I can send it to you because it's like now honed into like the right question set. But that relationship check-in piece is something I adopt in personal and professional life and with myself. And so that relationship check-in is what triggered the catalyst, because at WellEx, fantastic business, awesome people, incredible environment. I was building doing things and building things that I'd already built or done before, whether at Vitality or otherwise. And I think through my journey, as much as I love living in Dubai, and I still do, half and half, there were various factors on why I like and need to be in London, both professional and personally. I think I wasn't ready to give up the culturalness of London, the intellectual buzz of London. My romantic relationship was based here. And hey, look, it's nice to be able to put on a coat and be cold occasionally. rather than dripping in sweat. And I wanted to, I'm so greedy right now in my life, and I just wanted the best of both worlds, and I knew I could have that. Plus, the product with WellEx is built. And I think once you've got the product built, my role and what I could contribute diminished quite quickly. I didn't want to be on the ground 24/7 managing people, because that's just not what I want to do. I said at the start, I don't really like people, and I'm not going to change that. So it made sense. But I'm going to also answer it with more honesty than I've already given you. And that is, I went through my own mental health journey, and mental health became so important to me. In so many ways. I've always been really, really physically fit. I've always, been able to lift weights and run marathons and do whatever I wanted to do. But when your mental health goes, you realize that, all of those things that you think matter, whether it's titles or your fitness or your wealth or money, all the things we talked about before, what your parents think of you, none of that matters when you lose your mental health. And I really did. I was very, very, very close to ending it all 2.5 years ago, which is something I'm really honest about. And I think through that, I realized that mental health is actually an area that I avoided and neglected, but it's something I'm really, really, really passionate about. And so working in mental health in London, in the cold and the wet and the dreariness, paying large tax bills was exactly what I wanted to do.
No, I think one thing I'll say on my behalf, Anushka, thank you for being so honest. Like really, that we're really humbled that you're being this honest with us. And I think the audience will say the same. But one thing, once again, it's really refreshing to hear is that throughout this entire journey, your whys have become like really crystal clear. Like when we go back to the beginning of this podcast, why did you want to do medicine? It was, I don't know. That was your like honest answer. But I think at this stage of your journey, it's kind of like all the noise is filtered out. You know your North Star, you know what's driving you, what drives you, and what can just be ignored and just put to the side, which I think for a lot of other healthcare professionals on their own journey, asking, as you said very eloquently at the beginning, asking these tough questions is harder. So what they do is put their head in the sand and just be like, I'll continue this hedonic treadmill till a consultant. But I have colleagues who are about to finish their training who are now like, what do I do now? I am the consultant, but I'm not happy. That happiness did not materialize. There was no gold at the end of this rainbow. But asking those questions and actually sitting down for hours with possibly no answers is really scary. But you have to do them, as you said, very eloquently said. But like I
Mohammed,
said, thank you again.
no, thank you for letting me be vulnerable and be myself. I love that you crystallized it for me, that my whys have got clearer. And I think unashamedly so. And I think that's the one thing I'd say is, when you actually have these difficult conversations, whether it's a relationship checking with yourself or whatever methodology you choose, when you actually are honest with yourself and you journal and you really think about your why, I think the most important factor there is there's two people, it's you and you. So often we look at external validation and other things to drive our engine, but it has to be you because you're the one experiencing life. And, I think that's why I did my relationship check-in with myself, because if I don't, like you say, I bury my head in the sand and I think everything's okay. And we do that so often because it's easier, but you then miss out on all the great things that could have happened.
Definitely. No, and like the whole point of this Outer Program podcast is not necessarily your startups or your ventures. We want to understand you. So, like I said, thank you again for being so honest and open. And as you said, Anushka, vulnerable with us. Before we leave, we always like to ask our guests two questions. Number one, you mentioned a few books along the 1 hour podcast so far. Are there any books that really stood out for you in terms of like crystallizing your vision, crystallizing your journey that you think everyone should have at least read once?
Oh, I'm looking at my bookshelf and I'm like, quick. So I tell you the book that changed my life.
That'll do. That'll definitely do. That'll definitely do.
That's
I'll
pretty
tell
high.
you the quote that changed my life. So when I left school, so I grew up in Saudi Arabia and we left school at the age of, I was like 12 and a half. When you leave school in Saudi Arabia, you get everyone to sign your white school shirt. I think it happens everywhere in the world, but hey, like we didn't know that at the time. And everyone gives you leaving cards. And I was coming to boarding school in the UK. One of my friends then, a lady now called Rebecca Tapper, gave me a card and it said, do what you love, the rest will come. And I still have that card today. It's the only card I've ever kept through my life. All my other Valentine's cards and birthday cards and everything else always been binned because I bin it every year as a decluttering mechanism. But that one card I've kept because I think, going back to what we were saying just before you asked me that question, I think doing what you love is the only way to do it, right? Being true to yourself and doing what you love because it makes life easier. And who doesn't want an easy life? And just going on from that then, I remember saying to my brother, oh my God, I find corporate politics really hard. And he was like, but you had politics in the NHS, you had politics at boarding school, you had politics at school. But you don't recognize that till you're in a frigging boardroom and people are like, arguing or, someone's backstabbing you on the other team or you're fighting over whatever it is at corporate. I don't want to give away all the trade secrets, but, you do fight. And he said to me, read this book and it's The Art of Savvy. And it's how to play. The subtitle is around playing the difference between high integrity politics and low integrity politics. So it's The Art of Savvy, and I can't remember the subtitles, but it's basically around how to be low integrity politics to your benefit versus high integrity politics. And this book made me realize that no matter what environment you are in this world, it can even be a WhatsApp group, right, or an Instagram feed or whatever. There's politics everywhere. That's how interpersonal dynamics will always bring politics. Differences will always bring politics. All of that, different perspectives, opinions, lenses. This book really taught me, I should say, the difference between low integrity politics, which erodes at your character, takes away self-esteem, breaks trust and credibility, versus high integrity politics. And by reading that book, and I generally read that book once every couple of years, it just reminds me that it's okay to be involved in the politics or play the game, because you have to play the game to win. You have to have skin in the game and you have to play the game to win, but play it in a way that is kind, caring, authentic, and it will serve you better. So that is my book.
Oh, that's amazing. And then the final question. Let's say me and Jing came to you, fresh-faced medics, whatever stage we are, even if we're not medics, like any healthcare professional, and we were gifted to have like one tidbit of advice from you, Anushka. what would you say as our mentor?
Apart from do what you love, the rest will come.
If that's it, that's fine.
I think
That's
it's that plus. No, I think it's that plus. I don't think I could mentor Jing because he's been far more successful than I've ever been. But he's very humble and he hides away. And I'm sure Mohammed, you have too.
I
But we've only met.
learn from everyone.
I think for me it would be invest in yourself. Whether it's executive coaching or therapy or courses or whatever it is, just invest in yourself. And don't force invest in yourself. In medicine, you get forced to invest in yourself because you get forced to pay for your exams. But really put your money in things that you want to do. And hey, look, true to myself, DJ decks, money spent well.
I think we need to invest in DJ Dexing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the take home from the past hour, I think. DJ Dex.
Can be back to back for music producers.
That's the next outer program. If you can do us a intro beat, Anushka, that would be great. We actually
I can
looking
do
for
that for
a
you this
jingle.
weekend.
Yeah,
Wow.
we need a jingle. We need
I'm
a
in.
jingle. See networking, guys. We've
I mean,
networked.
my DJ name has to be all over it though. My DJ name is Nyla, which is not in your
100%.
living room.
100%. We'll put you on blast on our intros and outros. So thank you again, Anushka. This has been like a really inspiring and like reflective 1 hour. I think compared to what other podcasts, I think one of the big take homes from me, having listening to your advice and your journey, is find your why and then build on your why and learn what your why is. And your why does change. So don't be like resistant to it. So we're just going to wrap up. Thank you again for listening to our audience. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, subscribe, notification bell on. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcast platform, please leave a like, leave any comments. And if you have any ideas for any guests, please do let us know. We're always receptive to new ideas. So thank you again, Anushka. And thank you again for those listening in. Take care, everyone.